episode 2 of the Dear Local Champion podcast. You know, the crazy thing about starting a podcast is the fact that it's been on my heart for the longest time, and I was pretty sure that the stories I would tell and the things I would share would be things that a lot of people would be able to relate to. But it's one thing to know that that's the case, and then to actually see it, as the case in real life. And it's mind-blowing. I'm so excited. Thank you so much to everyone who's already listened to the podcast and shared feedback. I think it's also still very, very, very worthwhile to introduce myself as we begin episode 2. So my name is Onometite and I am your host. I am a professional I have worked over the last 5-6 years in investment banking and consulting. I started my career with a few months in strategic consulting before moving over to London to work in investment banking. I'm currently actually about to start a new job in management consulting. More gist on that to come later on. But I'm so glad that you're here. On this podcast, we discuss careers, new moves, just figuring out the whole world of careers. And I feel like there's so many things I've learned over the years that you don't necessarily see like plainly written out because it's the softer side of things. So that's kind of where I want to place a lot of my focus. Last week we discussed doing it afraid. Honestly, if you've not listened, I think you should run off to episode 1 and listen. But if you have, and also if you want to listen to episode 2 and before episode 1, that's totally fine because the episodes in themselves are not necessarily sequential, so you can do it in whatever order that you want. But I will first of all say welcome. Okay, so today's episode is actually quite interesting. I know I'd already hinted to it last time that we had spoken about doing it afraid, when I said we'd be talking about doing, relationships in the workplace. And I think that, honestly, when I think about topics for each episode, it's usually very, very tough to pick one because there's so many crucial things, and it's the question of in what order do I want to talk about it. But you know what? I feel like there's some very, very heavy topics that are heavy on my heart, and I just want to go straight into them. And then as we go, we just flow, So today we're talking about playing nice, but before that, I would encourage you, if you're not already following the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Instagram or, subscribe to our YouTube channel, now is the time to follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram, so you can follow my Instagram handle, which is Dear Local Champion on Instagram, as well as the Dear Local Champion podcast on YouTube. Also, I've been mentioning how I really, really want us to introduce a segment into the podcast episodes where we get emails from you sharing your life experiences in your careers and just really brainstorming together on how we can make the most of our careers. So you can send an email to dearlocalchampion@gmail.com and we will discuss. So feel free. All right, let's get into it. So today we are talking about playing nice. The thing about starting a new job or moving into another job is the fact that there is the tendency, and I think one thing before I even go into what I want to discuss, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago when I released episode 1, a good friend of mine who'd listened to the podcast started a conversation with me, and I honestly found it to be such an interesting perspective because, you see, he was like, oh, how about the perspective or the potential to do a lot of hard things or volunteer yourself up for a lot of hard things and then you crash and burn? And my answer to him is what I will share shortly. A very wise man who I know says something very wise. Of course he does. He's a wise man. And he says that one of the most dangerous things in life is to play at extremes. You see, there are people who will tend to do everything. They must do all the hard things, which is not wrong, but then taking on way more than they can chew and then taking on too much or too many hard things at once and then failing, right? That's an extreme. what I'm trying to do on this podcast is to correct for extremes that I've noticed, right? For example, like I mentioned in the last episode, I've noticed that there's people who have, a lot of people, might I add, who have stuck to the extreme of, I want to just play it safe, do the simple tasks so that I don't get into trouble with making mistakes. And that's the extreme that we need to correct for by doing the hard things, right? But remember, balance is key, super key. So yeah, let's head into it. Playing nice. Dear local champion, play nice. You see, when a lot of people start new jobs, there's a tendency to want to just go hard and be like, you know what, I'm starting this new job, I'm going to show them the stuff that I'm made of, I'm going to put my head down and do all the hard work, and my work will speak for me. See, I've been there, I've done that. Don't do it. The thing about it is that, I'll start with an anecdote. Let's imagine person A. He or she is super talented, super sharp, but she has decided to take that approach I described, step into the workplace, just, maybe they're even doing the hard things, and then they're like, you know what, I'm going to let my work speak for me, and there's no need to form any, connections. The thing about it is, at the end of the year, when feedback is being shared to person A, it will be said, oh, you're so brilliant. Like, you do really complex work and it's so valuable. However, it seems like, you're not particularly a team player. I'd really like to see you in situations where you play, where you work better with the team, right? Now, person Z, who might not even be as technically sound as person A, might then get feedback like, oh, you did good work, you did well, but honestly, you're such a great team player, I really like how you integrate with the team. And you might find a world in which person Z actually gets rated better than person A. Why, you might ask? People like people that are personable. It's a simple rule. I don't know if you've ever heard it. When we were much younger and playing, when we were in playgroup or kindergarten, chances are we don't remember what our teacher said about us when we were in playgroup. But if you have nieces and nephews or children or, godchildren, you would hear the parents or the teachers at the end of a session give parents feedback on, how the kids perform. The kids are not doing rocket science, so most of the feedback they would get are things like, oh, Zoe plays nice, or Tom plays nice. Like, that's one of the strong feedback points that teachers give to parents at the end of the school term, because one of the major determinants and pointers to how someone will do when it comes to leadership and just as they progress in life is how they communicate and partner with people in their surroundings. You've heard it before, human beings are social beings, blah blah blah. It's important. You need to invest in relationships, even in the workplace. So on one side, work really hard. On the other side, you have to play nice, dear local champion. It is incredibly important. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So I think that it is fitting to just go through a few steps and things that I think are super important. One thing that I would say is primary is you have to show interest. People like people that seem to be interested in them. Think about it. Most of the friends you have now or the relationships you have right now are with people that just really like you. That's part of what drew, you to investing in the relationship. And I know that there is a difference between the relationships you have at work and the relationships you have in your personal life. I'm not asking you to have the same depth, but what I'm asking you to do is to invest in your work relationships. Because what you don't want is a situation in which you've worked in a particular place for 5 years, 6 years, you're leaving the organization, you've moved into another job, and you can't even have a coffee with anyone you've worked with. If you were asked right now to get some information from people in your old job, then it becomes tough because, oops, I forgot to actually build more than a work relationship with them. We don't want that, because where we're going, we are building towards stardom, permit me to say, in our careers. And the people that do the best in their careers are people who have been able to weave a web of connectivity across different organizations, across different colleagues. They don't have to be your besties, but they need to have a relationship with you. They need to regard you on a relational level. It's very important. And that's why we're having a discussion today. So remember, step 1, you have to show interest. None of that when you come to work on a Monday morning and you go straight into the Monday meeting, you work, churn out all the work you need to do, and then it's time for lunch, you put your AirPods in, and then you've gone to, Pret or to Starbucks or to, to have lunch. You have your whole 1 hour lunch with your, you're on the phone with your family, because I don't get enough time with my family. So you've left the office, spent the whole lunch break with your family on the phone. You come back, you put your AirPods back in, and you just work until evening. It's 6 o'clock. Oops, I'm back. You see, we need to find the balance. And this is where showing just a little bit of interest comes in. I would say that one thing I recommend is starting with, questions. For example, when you come to the office on Monday, I think it's super important that you ask people how their weekend went. I know it seems a little boring, we'll then talk about the weather. Who likes talking about the weather? It's London. Of course the weather wasn't great. Keep it to yourself. Breathe. You're going to ask. And one very important thing about building rapport is that you don't only ask for information, you encourage people to share information by offering up information, right? So we'll do a little role play. It's Monday morning. We have our Monday weekly meeting at 10 o'clock. First of all, I would recommend, or let's say we have it at 9:30. It's rarely ever at the actual time you're meant to get into the office. So I think pro tip is to come into the office early. So if, for example, your Monday weekly meeting is at 9:30, I would recommend that you come into the office at 9:15. Come in early. Come in, drop your things, and then there will be other people who are in the office already, and then just a little chatter. Let's say Amy sits beside you or Phil sits to your left. It's going to be hey, how was your weekend? And then you don't just ask, you also say something like, oh my gosh, my weekend was so busy. I went from Friday, I took a nap when I got home, and then I went straight into this thing that my friend was having in his house. And then Saturday, I went for a run. And even if your weekend was not, full of activity, I promise you can always make a not so exciting weekend sound a little bit more interesting. And I'm not asking you to fabricate things. I'm just asking you to share information, in an excited manner or in a manner that is relatable, I spent time with friends. Oh, I didn't do much this weekend. I just needed to rest. That's enough. And then you ask, how about you? What did you do this weekend? And then they share, right? And I think one important step to layer on this is when you ask for information and you get given information, it's very important to store it, because one thing that sets you apart when you build relationships is your ability to remember. Because when you remember something someone has shared with you, it gives them the impression that you care. And trust me, people love a good carer. So if Amy tells you that last week was tough, maybe her boyfriend had an accident, you're going to ask her next week, how's the boyfriend? Or let's say her neighbor's cat died. Oh my God, how's the cat doing? I mean, the cat is dead, but how's the neighbor doing? Did they do a burial, or a funeral? It's the little things. It's remembering. It's so important. And it will then take me to another important nuance. Not everyone will be willing to share information with you, and that's okay. Your role is to care and to share at least what you're comfortable with. But if you get the impression that Amy or Phil or Tolu or Fred or Charlie is not interested in sharing information, that's okay. Respect that boundary, and then move on. But I think it's super important to establish the fact that you care and that you're also interested in sharing parts of your life life with people. And I think before you step into a job, it's very important that you set for yourself the boundaries. I'm not going to, for example, I'm not going to discuss, let's say you decide that you're not going to discuss the inner workings of your marriage with anyone. No brainer. Like, oh, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to share so and so, right? You can have boundaries. That's totally fine, right? These are not your besties, but these are colleagues, and you need to invest in the relationship. So before you go into building a relationship, you should already have preset boundaries on what you're comfortable with sharing and what not, and to what extent. That helps you, but I think it is super important to invest in these relationships. Step 2, celebrations. I don't know if you can relate. You should, because you're probably aware of the fact that some of your closest friends are the ones who share in your wins, the ones who get super excited when things are going well for you. It's just natural, And so you kind of need to think about that in the work context. For example, when you hear that someone has, celebrated a big win, for example, let's say so-and-so closed a really big deal, like a really big deal, I think it's super important to celebrate with them. It doesn't need to be anything grand, but walk over to the desk and say, hey, I heard you guys closed so-and-so deal. Congrats, great job. How did it go? Was it tough? Oh, that's the one you were working late nights on over the last 2 weeks. Wow, well done. Like, literally little things like that, they make a difference. Especially, for example, if it's someone that you've been, you've never gotten the chance to have a conversation with, things like this could be great conversation starters. For example, let's say Fred is celebrating his 5-year anniversary at the bank. I would recommend, as you're going over to get, a bottle of water at the lunchroom, let's say Fred's desk is to the left. As you're passing by Fred, say, hey Fred, I heard it's your 5-year anniversary. Wow, 5 years at the bank, that's great. I think we should have coffee, whenever you're free, and I would just like to hear how it's been for you so far. That's a leg in. You have shown interest, you've congratulated him. Chances are he'll be okay with it. Chances are he'll say yes. And it is things like this that you do that lay the foundation for relationships. And then another subtopic under point 2 of celebrating with people is birthdays. I honestly think that birthdays are highly underrated. If you find out that it's someone's birthday, chances are that if they told you that it was their birthday that day, or their birthday was coming up, then it means that it matters enough to them for you to say happy birthday. Do you see what I mean? Like, they mentioned yesterday that their birthday is coming up. It probably means enough to them that if I tell them happy birthday tomorrow, it will strike a chord with them. And remember, we're not necessarily doing things to get things out of people. We're doing things because kindness is just such an underrated thing in the workplace, right? And I think another thing as well that's an extra layer to that is, if someone tells you their birthday is tomorrow, I think it's wise to put it in your calendar. Because imagine if next year you're still at the office, you're still at the same organization, and they're still there, and a week before you're like, hey, what are you doing for your birthday next week? It just means something. You probably get the chance of, how did you know it was my birthday? Oh, wow, you remembered. Things like that, a lot of people don't do them, and it stands you out as just someone who is personable. And a friend of mine did something really nice for me a few years ago. So in my old team, there wasn't necessarily the culture of like decorating desks and like doing lots of card signing, but I think it was more of a situation where people just got so busy and it was like, who will build the cat? So a friend of mine did something where she bought a big card and she passed it around the office and people signed it. And honestly, for over a year, maybe 2, I had it stuck on my wardrobe. It just meant so much to me that someone was able to just think of me in that way, to just get people to say a few, sweet things for my birthday. If that's the kind of thing that you feel like people in your office would be open to, you can also, do that. You can get a nice card. You can be that person who is just always so happy to celebrate with people on their big days. The person who gets people to be like, oh, hey, it's Carol's wedding. What are we doing to support her for the wedding? Like, oh, so and so had a baby, are we going to send her flowers? Like, just being that person, it could go a really long way. And I would say another very key point number 3, is finding the balance between, being personable and not being caught in office gossip. I know, I said it. Gossip is, I don't know why, gossip is such a magnet in the corporate world. It's so easy to find yourself caught up in gossip. I've been there, hand to heart. And it's honestly almost like a fine line. But what I've learned and what I'm working very hard to teach myself is the fact that kindness is so important. And if I find myself in a conversation where unkind words are being said about somebody else, I shouldn't be there, right? So I know you're investing in making friends in the office and having a nice little chit chat and a little laugh with people, but I think it's very important to know where to draw the line, because what I say to myself is, if this person is comfortable saying mean things about somebody else to me, and I just sit there, chances are some other day, they might be saying unkind things about me to someone else, right? Like, it's very important in situations like that to kindly excuse yourself. Oh gosh, I just realized I have an email to send. Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, okay. Well, oh gosh, guys, I just realized I need to go. Like, it doesn't need to be so obvious, but honestly, do everything you can to excuse yourself from conversations about people that are disrespectful. I think it's very important as well to build a brand as someone who is kind. Enough said. Now, point number 4. It is team events. I know you're an introvert. I know you just want to get your work done. I understand. I've been there. But I think that it is very important to make it abundantly clear to your colleagues that you like being their colleague. The thing about it is that at work, you never want to give the impression that you dislike it there, because it affects the quality of the work that you get staffed on. It affects the quality of just interactions in the office if your colleagues get the impression that you hate it there, or you just would rather not be there, right? Because people like to be around people that are just personable, right? And people notice these things. And people read meanings into things that you don't even think were a big deal. For example, there have been 2 consecutive team drinks. And for some reason, you're the only person who's missed both of them because, you're so busy. You're busy. I don't dispute it. But how come you're the only person who's missed consecutive team events? I think it's very important to be mindful. If the team is organizing something, do well to be present. If you're unavoidably absent, send apologies ahead. Try to ask people how it went. If you missed it, when they come back, ask how it went. Oh, how did it go? I'll see you at the next one. Oh gosh, like if someone comes to check on you, like, explain and make it clear that you really want to be there, but unfortunately you have this deadline. And if you can go socialize for a little bit and maybe leave early. But I think that it is not beneficial to consistently miss team social events, even if your excuse is work. You need to find a balance. And I think a subtopic under that is also just, I find that for many people who, for example, don't drink, for example, based on religious or health reasons or social reasons, there is a tendency to feel intimidated or feel the need to say, I don't know how they'll take it that I don't drink, so maybe I shouldn't go at all to the team dinner. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. The thing about it is you need to understand that you're probably not as weird as you think you are. You assume that because I'm in a commercial city like London or New York or Dubai. Well, I don't know about Dubai, but anyways, I'm in a commercial city like London or New York or Paris or Berlin. I don't know, that everyone drinks. So if I don't drink, then it'll be odd. But the truth about it is that there's several other people who don't drink based on social reasons, religious reasons, health reasons, and you just own it. Oh, gosh, nah, I don't drink. I'll have a juice, or I'll have a mocktail, or I'll have a, like, it's okay. Like, still be present. Talk to people. Have a laugh. Drink in hand. Communicating. Making your presence known. That's the most important thing. I think it's super important to stay true to your values, super important. And you can also draw the line. For example, if you don't party or you don't go to the club, you're like, oh gosh, I'll sit this one out. But there is often a dinner before the club. There's often a dinner before the kids go wild, Try to make yourself visible. Don't count yourself out on social events. It is super important. I think another very important thing as well is when there is a team activity. For example, let's say every summer the team goes bowling or the team goes on a ski trip. If you can, for example, for something that might cost a bit more money like a ski trip, I think if you can afford it, I think it is worth going. I strongly recommend, because it is in events like this that relationships are formed, that inside jokes are created, and you don't want to, if you can help it, be left out of certain key moments for the teams. If the team is taking, I think as a rule of thumb, if there's a team picture being taken during a game or like a social event, your face should be seen there, And I find that, for example, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, they're going bowling. I suck at bowling. If I go, they'll realize, like, who cares? Like, you're not going to these events to become the best at the games. You're going there to have a good laugh with your colleagues and to just let your hair down. So if, for example, you're super competitive and you don't want to lose, well, you can tell all your friends that we're going bowling for the next couple of months because I need to get great with my right arm swing or whatever. But be present. And if you're not great, still just have a good laugh. Like, play the games, laugh about how goofy it is. Like, that's the most important thing, is to share in the team spirit and to build the bonds. And when you go for these events, try to shuffle around, like speak with people, comment on how people are, doing in so-and-so game. Like, just mix around. I think it is such an underrated thing to just integrate socially into the team. Another thing that I would say is that for many people who come from minority backgrounds, there is a tendency to only sort of form friends with people who look like you, and key emphasis on only. Totally allowed to make friends with people who look like you, who come from the same place as you, it's totally fine. But if those are the only friends you make, then it's not so great. And I tell you from experience, because I feel like I didn't realize this when I started my career. It's super important to diversify. One of the most beautiful things about working in big corporate and working in multicultural cities like London and New York and, different places is the fact that you get to integrate into different cultures. You get to build a body of knowledge from different relational experiences. This is part of the beauty of working in a big city and just working in a big organization. I think it's very important to be interested. Ask about things. Oh, someone got married and let's say they're Hindu and they had a traditional wedding. Ask, how did it go? Oh my gosh, can I see pictures? How did that go? Like, it's very important to open your heart to just learning about other cultures, because just doing a good job from your 9 to 5 is not the be all and end all of your career. The totality of your career is not just in the technical work that you do. It's in the people that you meet. It's in the relationships that you meet. I want you to know that there's people who are doing fantastically well in their careers. years after starting off. And it's not necessarily just because they were super skilled. It's because they were able to make meaningful relationships that acted as springboards to launch them into greater heights in their careers. I want you to go into your work relationships with this perspective. Be open to meeting people. Be open to having a laugh with people. Be open to building relationships. I think on this leg, I would then move to another point, which is really be interested in sharing things about yourself that you find to be interesting. I find that a lot of us, because we're so used to our culture, we assume that there's nothing interesting about our culture. When you travel home for Christmas or when you travel home for the summer and someone asks you, how did it go? You say, oh yeah, it was okay. I just went home with family. Nope. Share. If you went home for a friend's wedding, you can be like, oh, it was so nice. Let me show you pictures. Like, people like to see these things. People like to see pictures. I found that something people would do sometimes is when they come back from somewhere, they would come with some traditional snacks or candy, right? So, for example, I'm from Nigeria. If I'm coming back from spending some time in Nigeria, I'll come back with some Nigerian snacks, like maybe some plantain chips or some, just something that I can say, oh, I brought some traditional plantain chips. Do you want some? Like, oh, I went for a wedding. Oh, I'll show you pictures. And it doesn't need to be everyone. It's the people that you're building relationships with. Share things about your life that you find to be interesting, because people like to be around people that are interesting, And so, for example, talk about the things that you like. Talk about your hobbies. Don't just talk about the work. Like, always find a way to, in conversation, for example, if there's a small meeting and we are done talking about the work and there's a little opening for small talk, feel free to share, about the weather, about how you're spending your summer holidays, ask people their plans, things like that. If you remember something they said the week before, say it. I find that this is something that my personal trainer does very well at the gym. She's super intentional about remembering the tiny things that I say to her. For example, if I said to her the week before that my godson was going to see the GP, when we meet up, she would say, oh, so how did the GP visit go? And it's things like this that make sessions that would be hard and just full of just really tough reps and sets to just be a bit more enjoyable, because I know that not only am I coming to work out, I'm also coming to share and just hear also what's going on in her life. It's things like this that make work enjoyable. I know that the workplace can be really tough. Trust me, I understand. But I believe that it's when you infuse little things like this that work starts to feel a little less like work. Another point I would share is that it is so important to introduce yourself to other things apart from the work. I would refer to them as extracurriculars, in the sense that, I know someone, for example, who was doing a really tough job, but somehow managed to also get involved in some charity work that the organization was doing. So, and it wasn't that frequent. It was like once a year that they would do charity donations and go around from desk to desk raising money for a particular charity. And somehow, in addition to the hard work she was doing, she also then got known as the person who was heavily involved in charity work, or getting involved in your office's recruiting activities, or managing the interns, or, for example, just the learning and development work at the organization. Just get yourself involved. Sorry, my mic. Just get yourself involved in just something else apart from the work, because these things add a little bit more spice to the work that you do. There is so much more to work than just the work. There are the softer things. This is how you build alliances. This is how you build professional relationships that span across organizations. It is in these little things that you begin to find out more about the people that you work with. You find out, and people then start to take more of a liking to you. The thing about it is that if you work on a project with someone and they like you, when asked for feedback, they're more likely to share the positive things and just pass on the negatives, because there's just a bit more of an emotional attachment to you. And honestly, it does not excuse not doing a good job and being lousy at your job, but it makes it just fuller, It gives a bit more color and structure to the work that you do and the investments that you make at work. I really want us, as, the global champions that we're becoming, to be very intentional about things like this. Over the course of our time here on Dear Local Champion, we will discuss many things like this. But I want you to understand that as we speak and as we discuss topics, it is super important to listen actively. If I ever mention anything that strikes a chord with you, feel free to pause and just reflect. Ask yourself, is this the way that I approach work? Is there something I could be doing better? And just reassess. And I really want you to step into the new week, the new day, just with lessons that you've learned and just the decision that you're going to make every day better. That every time that something is highlighted to you that you know you could be doing better on, you pour yourself into doing it better. And I really believe that your future self will thank you for it. And like I said last week, I also will thank you for it. Because this is how we're building a community that is, full of people who are stronger in their careers. I'm so happy that you've made it this far to the end of the episode. And honestly, I would say that the time just flew by. There's so much that even as I've been speaking, I've learned. And I'm really looking forward to all the many things I will discuss. Like I mentioned, I really want to hear what you think and what you've learned from the podcast episodes. And so a perfect way that you can share feedback is by sending an email to dearlocalchampion@gmail.com or sending me a direct message on Instagram at dearlocalchampion. Follow us on Instagram, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Dear Local Champion, and also follow the Spotify and Apple Podcast episodes. There will be an episode waiting for you every 2 weeks, and there's just so much to learn. I'm so happy that I get to do this with you. I can't wait to see you at the next episode. I will leave it to mystery to find out what the next episode is, because honestly, I have many things on my mind. I'm thinking something regarding what to do when you fail, or just a few other topics that are around this topic, but I will leave it to you to figure out and, guess until the next episode comes out. Until then.